supposed to start with. There we go. Recording. Well remembered, Meg. I was supposed to start with thanks for everyone taking the time to join us on today's Housing Hive session. As always, great to see some new faces, great to see some people returning as well. So hopefully you're getting value from these sessions. I think the last one was about 3 to 4 weeks ago. So thanks for coming back. Usually start with just a bit of a brief intro in terms of what we set this sort of webinar up for, why we do it, what our plans are for it. So we literally set this up around lockdown 1, which feels like a hell of a long time ago now. I suppose as a way to sort of use our position in the sector of having multiple, loads and loads of contacts throughout the housing sector and outside, just to help people navigate through the pandemic, really, because it was all a bit unknown and a bit scary at first. So that's what we set this up for to begin with. And then since then, grown into its sort of own little mini community where, as I say, people come back when we run these fortnightly or every 3 to 4 weeks. Sometimes we do presentations from our side of things, have guest speakers from inside and outside of the sector. And obviously today, as you would have seen when you guys all signed up, we've got Dan and Nick from PA on today to talk about digital transformation, digital communications from both the wider digital strategy, how the website and portal fit into those. So quick intro to myself. My name's Jacob. Good to see you all. I'm digital strategist at Prodo. So worked with the agency for 3.5 years or so. My job basically to explore digital transformation opportunities and projects with housing associations looking to increase channel shift and accelerate channel shift. I was actually PA's account manager for 2 different stints, so I know the guys quite well. And I've got Liv with me as well from Prodo and a couple of other Prodo faces. Do you want to say a quick hello, Liv?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Liv. I've been with Prodo a couple of months now, but I actually worked here before about 5 or 6 years ago as well. So just taking over as account manager for PA and having some really great conversations with both Dan and Nick's team. So yeah, it's good to see you all today.
Good stuff. Now's probably a good time to introduce you two guys as well. If you want to say a quick hello, Dan and Nick, a quick intro to your roles at PA and what you're here to do.
Yeah, do you want to
go for it, Dan?
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in. So hi everyone, my name's Dan. I'm the digital program manager for PA Housing. Been with PA for 6-7 years now. Well, started as ASRA and what is now PA. I joined as a project manager, working primarily on the sort of IT implementations, IT system upgrades. So worked across the business, working on a lot of the key sort of business systems. And that kind of led to sort of my current role in many ways, which is sort of day-to-day, having day-to-day responsibility for the customer portal, my PA. That's me, Nick.
Morning, everyone. My name's Nick. I'm the communications manager for PA Housing. I've worked here for, 14, nearly 15 years.
Really?
Started in housing management. I was a graduate trainee housing officer many years ago, but for the past kind of 7-8 years, comms and marketing has been the focus. So day job really these days is everything you'd associate kind of with the communications team. So from the digital side, it's website, social media, email campaigns, kind of marketing, but also kind of focus on all the customer and corporate comms. So customer magazines, kind of corporate literature, everything, as I say, you'd associate with a comms team.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, guys. And yeah, Dan and Nick have been our key contacts at PA and even before, as Dan says, before PA when it was ASRA for many years now. So we work really closely with the guys. I suppose a good place to start really would be, obviously there's housing associations and contacts from housing from all different sort of stages of the digital journeys, I suppose. Might be worth starting, guys, with just a bit of a brief overview of the digital communications tools that you have at PA and the ones that you use sort of regularly, so if that's okay.
Well, I'll let Nick start on this one.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, the main ones are kind of the obvious ones, to be honest. So obviously we have our website, which is designed for our customers to use, but obviously it deals with a lot of stakeholder kind of engagement as well. But when we designed it with you guys, we intentionally wanted to make it a customer-facing website. So we've tried to kind of pull that through with a lot of the work that we do. That links through to our social media accounts. So we're currently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then things like LinkedIn for more of a corporate side. So I'm resisting the temptation to join TikTok, despite lots of people trying to convince me to. And then I guess the main thing which Dan can certainly kind of chip in on would be our customer portal, my PA. So Dan, probably a good point for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm sure many of you sort of have something similar. So my PA is our customer portal. It's built as a web responsive portal. We do have an app launcher, which is more of a wraparound sort of the web version, because our sort of research suggested that would reach the maximum amount of our particular audience. That portal has quite a lot of integration into some of our key systems. So Northgate is our main housing management system, Keystone for sort of compliance, sort of property related stuff, and we're also now doing a lot of work, with as our friends at Bredo will attest, to link our CRM. So we've in the past couple of years been on quite a big journey with our Dynamics CRM system. So the aim of that really is to probably centralize a lot of these communication tools and make sure that anyone in the organization can have that centralized view of communications with all customers, what's going on with that person, what's going on with that property. So lots of work still to do on that road, but that's really underpinning a lot of the work we're doing at the moment.
Yeah. I'm hearing that more and more, actually, Dan, with people I speak to in the housing space, that people seem to be moving to Dynamics more and more seemingly. Is that a program that's slowly sort of phasing in, and Northgate will and therefore sort of phase out?
I think that's an option. Whether that will actually happen probably remains to be seen. I think the beauty of a product like Dynamics is that you can sort of pick and choose. So in theory, it can do everything for you. That will come at huge cost, huge investment, will take a lot of time. And I guess, from our point of view anyway, we've not been able to replace every system that we might have thought we would initially. So there's still that conversation, should this activity happen in that legacy system or in another specific tool for that? Or actually, is this something that could be, is it generic enough? Could it just sit in the CRM? So we still ask that question at the start of a lot of our projects, really. And I think the result will be, over time, I think we'll probably move to that. But then, again, we're probably tied into certain system contracts for a number of years, etc. So I think we're kind of trying to look at it as and when those procurement cycles kick off. That's the starting point to then say, what's our end goal with that process or that part of the business, that team, working closely with them and the customers it affects to really define where does it best sit. So yeah, I don't think it's going to, in my personal view, I don't think it will replace everything, but there's definitely scope for reducing what it was a few years ago, a huge estate with loads of different applications across the business. So there's definite opportunity there for a bit of streamlining.
Great stuff. Hopefully that gives everyone a really good picture of PA's sort of current systems in place and where they are at the moment with digital communications tools and what have you. So thanks for that, guys. I suppose the next question is one that most webinars these days seem to cover. So past 18 months or so, what did the pandemic mean for you in terms of impact on your digital transformation plans, on implementation of those? What's that look like for you?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Dan.
No,
we should have rehearsed, didn't we?
Should have, really. Yeah, I guess from my point of view, the biggest impact was bringing forward some of the key things that we kind of had on the roadmap. So in particular, the move to Office 365, Microsoft Teams, that was on the roadmap. It was probably going to be later on this year, early next year. So that had to be brought forward. But we were fairly lucky in other ways in that there was already, I guess, because of how the company is built up, we had 3 offices. There was already a proportion of people that worked semi-remotely. So the infrastructure was kind of set up for that. So from a back office and systems processes point of view, it wasn't as painful for us, which meant the overall impact on our digital strategy wasn't, it wasn't a complete 360. It was more of a bit of a shuffle along, change a few priorities. But luckily we've managed to keep keep on with most of the big things we wanted to try and achieve during that time. Would you say that's fair, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was that idea that it just forced a lot of things through much quicker. So, you know, overnight everyone started to work from home. So from a colleague perspective, there was that kind of forced, where, you know, it was forced upon us. We had to start working remotely. We had to start working more digitally. And as Dan says, bringing Office 365 in probably 18 months sooner than was planned really kind of helped drive a lot of the things that as a business we were hoping to do. And then that linked into the work that we were doing for customers. So from a comms perspective, where my team would be regularly kind of carrying out audits of the websites to refresh content, and that was maybe happening, you know, either weekly or monthly, depending on the pages. That was having to happen daily because of the amount of information that had to change. You know, you would see, I'm not casting aspersions, but you would hear Boris talking, you know, 5 p.m. the night before. I then had a couple of hours to figure out what he's actually said, translate it, and put it onto the website. So just that constant kind of shift of information meant that we really had to think about how we were communicating digitally with customers to make sure that it was as up to date as possible.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was very much that at the time, wasn't it? It was like, how do we consume all this information that we're being given, which does seem to change significantly day to day, and then get that across to customers in like an easy to consume format, I suppose. So yeah. What about obviously we've got like, you've got the website and the portal and your other sort of tools and systems in place. What did the pandemic impact sort of progress or prioritization of improvements or developments on those systems at all? Did that have an impact on change of priorities at all?
Yeah, I mean, as Nick says, so very quickly there was a big sort of deluge of requests in terms of just getting information proactively to customers. So, you know, a lot of the work that, and for us internally, it was about figuring out how do we hopefully update it in one place and then it will just filter out, particularly to avoid different versions or people getting a slightly different message, you know, in different places. So we quickly had to look at the processes we were working on and making sure that they were meeting that brief. Luckily, quite a few of them were. So we kind of had, you know, we'd done the big processes. So, you know, your repairs, you're making rent payments, things like that. So it did allow us to focus on other things and also be a bit more responsive to some of the business challenges. So access to properties continues to be quite a big challenge, particularly in, you know, the safety area. So gas safety checks, electrical safety. So that was a piece of work that was on the agenda, but again, got brought forward. So again, fitting in with that, trying to be as responsive, as agile as we can to that changing environment and really trying to work with customers to understand, well, what are the challenges the business is seeing, but what are the challenges the customer's seeing, and how can we try and make sure the work we were doing really married up to what they needed at that time and what they're interested in.
Yeah, change of expectations and demands, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that led to a bit of a cultural shift as well, because I think things like we historically always printed rent statements for our customers, and it had been on the cards for some time that we would start to shift away from that. But again, it was a little bit further down the timeline. I think the shift to a more digital way of working and kind of consumers understanding that more meant that we were actually able to bring that work forward. So we don't print any rent statements at all. So that's brilliant from a digital perspective. You have to opt in if you want a printed statement, where it was always the other way around. But at PA, that also helps with kind of our value for money work, our sustainability work, because we're not printing as much. So there's been loads of different kind of offshoots to some of the work that's come directly from the pandemic.
That's interesting. What about from a like a digital engagement perspective with customers? Is that obviously that's sort of generally on the up anyway, certainly with the systems and platforms in place that you guys have. How's that sort of changed over the last 18 months or 2 years or so? Yeah,
I mean, I think Nick will agree. We've seen a big increase in interest, I'd say, in the digital channels. So from a point of view of registrations for the portal, that has increased, perhaps not as dramatically as we might have expected. So we're still having to do a lot of work to reach some of the, you know, more reluctant groups, as I call them. But at the same time, there's been big increase in uptake in people saying, I'd like to do this, but I need help. So what help can you offer? So, our resident involvement team, I've been working quite a lot more with them in the last sort of 18 months than I had done previously, for example, on those sorts of things. In terms of usage, we saw a big increase. So current users of the MyPA portal, for example, we used to see month on month, there's about a 50% login rate from registered. That's now hovering about 80, sometimes as high as 86% sort of month on month. So fantastic retention once we convert people to be digital, if you like. So yeah, there's been a big increase. And then similarly from colleagues, huge, the customers' increased appetite for digital, if you like, is definitely pushing our colleagues as well. They're being asked about the services that we offer more, how do they access them, which in turn is fueling more requests from further, corners of the business that perhaps were less interested previously. So, from a purely selfish point of view, it's been very positive in that sense, in that it's, that digital culture's really developed quite quickly, with minimal effort, I guess, from our part. So that has been a positive from a purely selfish point of view in terms of inline registration targets and things like that.
How do you go about then, Dan, with like the change of like internal culture and more requests coming from internally and things? How have you managed to go about sort of coping and prioritizing and then rolling those out? I think PA probably one of the organizations we work with, you guys over there, where you appear to do a hell of a lot of work internally prior to even coming to us with a brief of what you're looking to do. So is that had to sort of evolve or flex at all in terms of how you approach that?
Yeah, I think yes and no. So, I'll talk about sort of the prototype in a moment. So you're right, we do quite a lot of work. So we'd like to be, we really develop the requirements so that we have, a degree of confidence that it's what business needs, that it will solve the problem that we're trying to solve, that customers, have an interest in performing that activity online, which isn't always the case. So we definitely, do a lot of, have different sort of involved groups of customers who genuinely do contribute to what we're going to be building over the next 6, 12, 18 months on MyPA, and not just there, they contribute to the whole sort of digital strategy. That in turn, I think you're involved in those conversations. We changed the way we work with you guys a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because we needed more of that agility. So we used to be a bit more, hi Jacob, I want this particular thing building on MyPA, please. How much and when can we have it? Whereas now we've moved more to let's book sort of blocks of time, and then that gives me that ability to move things in and out, based on the information that Nick and his team might be receiving, or anyone else for that matter. So I think that's how we've managed to become a little bit more agile than we used to be, which in turn has allowed us to, over the last 18 months, we've launched probably lots more features than we had done in the same period leading up to it, at a time where as well internally we were, our resources under heavy pressure with a lot of, for me, managing a lot of different projects, and my team, just on changing the current systems and current ways of working to support, as Nick said, everyone suddenly being at home, rather than in the office. So yeah, it's like I say, it's an evolution of probably the direction we're heading, but like everything else, probably had to compress it overnight, change that way of working, but it seems to have sort of paid quite a few dividends for us.
Yeah.
And I think internally the thing that I think is works really well, and I'm not just saying it because you're on the call, Dan, but say Dan and I work in different departments. So I head up our comms team, Dan works in our projects team, obviously leading our digital work. But we try really hard to make sure that externally a customer just sees one product. So even though the website is one product and MyPA is one product, we try and make it as seamless as possible. So there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that goes in between Dan and myself and our teams to try and make it as seamless as possible for a customer. So if they're on the website and they end up in MyPA or vice versa, it feels seamless. It feels part of the same site. So I think part of the work internally behind the scenes is really worth mentioning to kind of anyone on the call who's thinking how that interaction might work.
Yeah, Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, we spoke, didn't we, about the importance of you guys making sure that these almost the parts of your digital strategy are all just parts of one overarching sort of approach and offering, I suppose. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have got a couple more questions for you, but we have had loads and loads come through as well, like prior to the webinar today, but also a couple that have just popped in the chat as well. So maybe if we could cover off a couple of those, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've had one from Christian, who's asking a question to comms officers, who probably sits with your side, Nick.
Yep.
Has the coronavirus restrictions impacted social media engagement for you due to the lack of being able to get out there and take photos and videos and things? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, it's been really, really tough. So if you follow our social media, particularly our Twitter, we have an army of, they're called Team Purple. They're our kind of housing officers, neighbourhood coordinators, who pre-pandemic were just out constantly taking selfies with customers, various events. And obviously that stopped overnight. And a lot of our social media content had to shift completely from that customer engagement, real on that, kind of on the ground stuff, to messaging around wash your hands, stay safe, kind of latest updates on how our services were being affected. And it did really kind of change the tone of our social media. I think the reason that it was okay is because everybody was having to do the same thing. Yeah. So if you looked kind of across the sector, not even just the housing sector, but if you looked across social media, that messaging that was coming through was really all about the pandemic. So we tried to make sure that we were getting the key kind of safety messages across, but doing it in a way that was still very much PA. So trying to bring as much of our branding and our tone of voice and things through. It did impact a little bit on engagement. We weren't getting the same level that we normally did, but it does seem to be bouncing back now. Now we're out and about again. Now we're able to kind of have those more face-to-face contacts, and that's translating through on social media. It's definitely bouncing back. But yeah, it did impact, but not hugely, I would say.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hope that answers your question, Christian, if you're still with us. Thanks for that, Nick. And the next one, I suppose, is for yourself, Dan. So Carol's asking, is the MyPA portal tenant portal only, or have you got a means of sort of digitizing the process for incoming tenants and those sort of pre-allocated and waiting for a tenancy? What's that look like for you in terms of process?
Yeah, ours is currently for tenants only. We have looked at how to. Well, the incoming experience is digitized, but it's separate at the moment. And that was caused by an issue previously with a legacy system. And then we had a big bit of work planned for that. And then there was talk of a merger. So that got sort of artificially stopped for that reason. But yeah, we are looking at how we can make the application process seamless, and then there'll be no break. You don't have to then re-register for MyPA, but it is currently separate, even though it is all digital. So the application process is completed digitally, forms are completed digitally. So you'd think it would be fairly simple, but IT tell me it's not as easy as that, as is always the case. So
yeah, every time we get involved in that side of things, in terms of like trying to digitize that process from lettings onboarding through to customer portal, it does seem pretty tailored.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's one of the big complicating factors was because we've grown as a company through multiple sort of mergers and acquisitions. There were multiple processes around the business, so every time we looked at it, it was just too different and for too many different use cases, and it became a huge piece of work.
Yeah.
When actually what all those teams were working towards was a much more consistent experience and process anyway. So that's why we've had to sort of stick a pin in that one and come back to it a bit later than we would have liked. But yeah, it's definitely, if you can make it one seamless way, and definitely try and do that, I'd say.
Yeah. Another one for you to tick off the list at some point, Dan, I'm sure.
Yeah. A few more grey hairs for that one.
Yeah. we had another one just after that from Jane, who's asking specifically around how useful it is for you to have the web-based portal versus the app. Have you seen like a preference for one or the other? Is there specific, is one?
Yeah, it can be tricky to really pin down, as in whether it's definitely a separate audience for both, or is it just the device they happen to be on. It looks to me like there's a mixture. So I guess if budgets allow, have both. From an engagement point of view, having an app is great because it's much easier to say, just go to your app store, search for PA housing, and it'll be the one, the one official app that's there.
Yeah.
So most people know how to do that if they've got a phone, for example. So that's the big benefit we see from having an app. In turn, obviously that comes at a cost. You have to build both, support both. So the impact on, IT, budgets, etc., needs to be considered. So it's, if your customers are telling you they've got a strong preference, listen to that. The chances are it'll be a mixture. Looking at my Google Analytics sort of stats like I do daily, there is a mixture of traffic from different sources. And it's pretty clear, even though it's not sort of tracked one-to-one, that some people who have the app still will access it via the web. So I personally believe if you can offer both, do both. Plus, if there's ever a problem with one or the other, hopefully, access isn't totally denied, even though that's very rare. But it pays not to fully depend on one route, I suppose.
I suppose on the app side of things as well, you get the benefits of the device-specific functions as well. You don't like push notifications and GPRS.
The login's the big one that customers like. So your fingerprint, your facial recognition, those things. As anyone here, I'm sure, knows, I spend half my life resetting passwords still. So if you can avoid that, it's definitely a bonus.
Yeah, me too, every single day. Okay, they're the questions that we've had through the chat. So we have had a load more through, which we'll hopefully get to before the end. But before we get there, obviously you guys have achieved so much over, 2, 3, 4, 5 years even, from where you were digitally to where you are now. And I know there's still, because we're in conversations with you, still plans to do a hell of a lot more, and we've covered some of that today. But what would you say if someone was to ask you what's next for PA from digital transformation and digital projects perspective? How would you answer that one?
So I guess from my point of view, we've still got a way to go. So we've got over half our tenants are registered to use MyPA. So we've always gone with a very much this is optional, not replacing anything. We're not taking phone lines away or anything like that. So we've still got a lot of work planned to continue that push. It's a fairly mature offering now for us. So we know we're hitting those more resistant groups of customers. So we're working a lot with the internal teams to upskill them, build up their knowledge, give them the confidence to really go out and sell that benefit to those customers. At the same time, we're just looking to widen the range of services and things that are on offer.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at some quite different sort of bits of content. So it's not, MyPA started as a very transactional. If you need to raise a repair, you can do that. If you need to make a payment, you can do that, which is fantastic. And that's obviously going to be the core of your offering. But once you've done those things, or you've got a direct debit set up and you've not got any repairs pending, what's going to draw you to use MyPA? So we are looking at ways to diversify that content a bit. And there's a lot of, we've built a lot of stuff over the last 18 months about supporting people when they're looking for work, also promoting our own internal adverts, as well as encouraging our suppliers to say, if you've got a job advert, let us advertise it through our portal. We've recently launched the MyPA marketplace. So again, it's just a way of allowing customers to advertise their own business on there, for free to other PA customers. So really pushing that, help times of hardship, see a lot of people start their own business. We run a business incubator training course again with the RI team. And this seemed like an obvious way of really promoting that work, but as well as supporting the people and the customers that are going through that program and saying, once your website's up and ready, or you've got your social media ready, you're ready to sell a product or service, we'll help you push it to our community of 13,500 other customers that are using it. So like I say, we're we're really looking at what other services customers might need from us day to day that aren't purely just a transactional, I've got a problem, please can you fix it?
Yeah.
But of course, that remains a focus.
I suppose the more and more people start using it for those other things as well, you're naturally going to get the benefit of them probably using it for those other transactional items as well, I guess, as well. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, there's kind of two strands that I'm really focused on at the moment, both of which I'm in conversations with you and Liv about. So the first one's really around kind of accessibility. So one of our key values and one of the things we're most proud of at PA Housing is our heritage. So for anyone who doesn't know, we originally started as a BME housing association, housing Asian elders in Leicester. And that's something that's always kind of followed us through, and something that we're really passionate about. So, you know, we've won awards for our approach to equality and diversity, and we want to make sure that that continues to translate in all of our work, especially around digital. So that links to what the website looks like, how it functions, and exactly the same with my PA. So we're working with you guys at the moment on an accessibility audit to kind of see where we're at, looking at things like reading ages, for example, on the website. Are they as good as they could be, to try and help us get to the point that we are confident that the website is as accessible as everybody should be for everybody. The other thing that I'm looking at the moment is around just kind of transparency in our communications. So the idea of some live KPI reporting on our website showing you know, our current rent arrears, our current repairs performance or complaint levels or whatever it might be. So rather than just kind of, you know, your annual report being plonked on there once a year, trying to have some live data to show to everyone who's looking kind of how we're performing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That transparency idea is filtering through again to the work we'll be doing on my PA. So, you know, being really sort of open and honest with the data that we've got on properties, we're showing where asbestos is in the property, for example, and what to do if you're worried, who to contact. Fire risk assessments, looking at how we can share those, you know, where relevant. So it's really, you know, we'll all be led, won't we, by the housing white paper in terms of a lot of these things, particularly around the safety and compliance aspects. But we really want to be upfront and really show where the data is, where we can get to that data, and then looking to work with customers to plug those gaps. So, you know, there's a nice big red warning if your gas safety check is overdue, and really putting that onus on the customer to say, we will have contacted you about this, we've sent you letters, it's still, you know, the date's fast approaching, we need to get into your property, please. Let us know if there's a problem, you know, this is how you do that quickly and easily. So, you know, fulfilling our requirements, but also really putting that onus a little bit back on customers to help us achieve that as well. So it's quite exciting stuff coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was yourself actually, Jenny, who made the point on a previous Hive around like the different layers of people sort of consuming and getting in touch with PA. So the first layer being the old way of doing things, you know, calling, you know, coming to see you for something, which sort of sparked the whole digital channel shift movement. And then the next layer would be digitizing that so it's quicker and easier for you to service. And then the next one to that is literally the transparency you were talking about. So making things so transparent that people don't actually need to get in touch with you because they can just access the information already. So yeah, it's interesting. We have had loads of questions too, like I said, from people before we started today. So Stockport Homes, Raven Housing Trust, Almond Housing, Ty Calon, Onward, loads of people have been in touch. There's a bit of a common theme throughout the questions. A few of them are really interesting, but Nicola from Stockport and a couple of other guys asked as well, just generally around, it seems like this is an issue people are facing. Have you got any top tips around engaging staff or wider stakeholders in the digital transformation journey?
Other than do it and do it early. No, I think one of I'm sure Dan will agree with me, one of the probably mistakes we made very early on was to not try and engage our staff. So we had all these great plans, we had all these great kind of products kind of that we wanted to kind of start getting customers to use, but we hadn't engaged our staff during that process. So from a comms perspective, I always say that my biggest marketing channel is our staff. If they're out on site speaking to a customer, and they happen to have read, a magazine that I've said that says, register for my PA, it's really quick to kind of manage your home online, and that staff member says, I've no idea what's my PA, what are you talking about? You've instantly lost that customer. Yeah. So spending the time early on to engage with your staff, particularly the ones who are customer facing, get them to use your portal, get them to use your website, get them to understand what information is there, so that they can be that voice selling it to people as well. Equally, that goes two ways. They get some really brilliant feedback that is helpful from our perspective to say, oh, actually, customer was on this page on the website or in this section of my PA, not really working for how you think it is. So it's great as a two-way piece of feedback as well. I think, Dan, when we talked about this yesterday, you were saying around kind of getting colleagues to engage is really important from the technical side of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've mentioned there, you get that fantastic first-hand feedback. You'll also understand what, both from customer point of view, but also a staff point of view, don't assume that they are comfortable with selling a web portal. They might not, or an app. They might not know what that is and be, willing to admit that. They'll use multiple systems in their day jobs, no doubt, but there'll be varying levels of confidence as well from all parties. So we use lots of different channels to have lots of different levels of communication. So there's your traditional all company emails to say, we're switching X, Y, and Z on my PA or on the website, go and have a look. We'll use the internal messaging channel. So Teams, now for us is a key one where, every week we'll try and filter through some information or key stats, how it's performing, particularly any problems. That's the other great way of reassuring customers that if staff go out there and know that, yeah, there's a bug, we've identified a bug, we're working on it, should be, it's in fixes in test. It's a great message to go out to people rather than just saying, oh, I tried to make a payment and it didn't work. So tackling that uncertainty early can be really valuable to making sure people come back and try again next month to make their payment, for example. So go on, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, I think a big part of our comms around right at the start and continuing is around the idea of customer choice and building trust in the product. So I think from a customer perspective, it was there was that, well, I don't want to, if I don't want to use the app, are you going to turn the phones off? No, that was never part of our kind of messaging. It was the phones will always be on, but if more of you start to use my PA, the people who do need to ring up might get through quicker. That was kind of the idea behind it. And the flip side of that from a staff perspective was, oh, if you're investing all this money in technology, does that mean you're not going to have as many people answering the phone? Do I need to worry about my job? Yeah. So I think, as Dan says, understanding, particularly from a staff perspective, where there maybe their concerns are. Is it that they're just really not confident in using technology, but they're maybe a little bit embarrassed to admit it? Is there some fears around, well, I work in a contact center or in a hub or whatever, is this going to directly impact on my role? And trying to tackle your colleague engagement from that perspective as well.
Great.
That was, sorry, Jake, that was a lesson sort of we learned in terms of our targeting as well. So when we first started, we were heavily seeing a reduction in the number of phone calls that the contact teams took. And to be honest, that hasn't transpired. So initially you sort of think, well, is this not working for us? But actually, when we delved into it, we realised that, well, at that time, we were only actually answering 80% of calls at busy times. That figure is now much higher. So it's really being clear in what is the data showing you, having your reporting set up to really understand the business impacts of sort of how digital is working, so that you don't think you're just, are you just opening up other channels, for people to get through, which just comes with, additional cost. And that might be the mission, that's fine. But, for us, it was trying to shift people from one way of interacting to another. which, you know, I'd say we've semi sort of succeeded in that, you know, and the work continues, but we did also have to adjust our expectations.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Dan, because I think lots of organizations, when you start on this process, there is not an assumption, but perhaps a bit of an expectation that you are going to shift, you know, X number of calls into X number of digital transactions, and it's almost like a binary exchange of those things. But it's really interesting what you've reflected on there, because you've got a kind of performance improvement that's been facilitated by the digital service. So your traditional channels are being boosted by the presence of the digital channel as well, but also the quality of that contact is probably improving, because you've got, you know, some of that more transactional stuff being handled digitally and automatically, which is freeing up resources, letting people answer the phones quicker, letting people have those more meaningful conversations with your customers. So yeah, I think that's where, thanks for sharing that. It's a really good perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We have just got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to pick out one more question, which also came from Nicola, actually, which I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, we've spoken a hell of a lot about the digital things you've implemented and the success of those over the last few years, and sort of prior to that. Talked about the change of internal culture shift, talked about some of the awards and things you mentioned, Nick, around diversity and equality. What would you title your biggest success and why?
Oh my God.
From 2 minutes, go for it.
I think so. My focus has always been the website. So I think the fact that and you know, it's always work in progress, but the fact that we have a genuine customer orientated website. Yeah. When I took over in my role 7-8 years ago, our website was horrendous. Not only did it have clip art on it, massive bugbear of mine, it didn't know what it was trying to be, and it didn't know who it was trying to be there for. There was no real customer engagement in it. There was no information for customers, really. So we've worked really hard to completely turn that around, so that a customer can go to the website and get information that they need for their tenancy or their whatever service they're receiving from us. It has all the corporate stuff there as well. It has all the stakeholder stuff there as well. But the primary focus for that website should be our customers. So I think the fact that we've managed to really push that and get that buy-in and understanding from PA senior leaders that they should be the main audience for the website is probably the thing that I'm most proud of. Yeah,
that's a very good answer. And within time as well. What about you, Dan? Agree or something different?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think the other thing for me is probably, I mean, we've had some great successes. We can show some real sort of high value business impact, which is great from a, you know, project manager will tell you, you know, ticking off some of those sort of high level objectives. But I think further than that, for me, the biggest success is probably just that really putting in a digital culture. So overall, the digital program started, and it was quite focused. There was a set group of people when we very first kicked it off working on it. And what's pleasing now is just the number of different digital initiatives that are starting from across the business, and sometimes we're involved, sometimes we're not, and that's been a really nice journey to sort of be part of. And that some of the tools we've put in place are just taking on a life of their own, and people sort of, once they know what the tool is and does, like appointments, you know, an appointments tool has been a really interesting one that got about 5, 6, 7, 8 different teams who are really interested in actually how they might be able to use that. And it's way beyond the original scope of the small scale trial we were looking at, for example. So, yeah, like I say, I'm not going to take all credit for that, you know, at all. It's definitely helped by, as we've spoken about at the top of the call, sort of the environment that we're all in is just pushed that further interest in digital across the board. But like I say, the number of requests we get from different parts of the business that historically were quite reticent and were quite tied to their paper processes, if you like, is really encouraging. And it's just nice to see that evolution happening.
Great stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we've loved being a part of even just you know, a percentage of that with you guys. It's been great working with you over the years, and that's why you often get calls from people when I've stuck your name on a reference sheet for a tender that I'm writing. So that's that was great, guys. Thank you very much for that. We have run out of time, but I think we covered loads of good stuff there and answered a load of the questions. So hopefully everyone on the call took something from that today. But I really appreciate your time and the prep we put in yesterday and the day before, and joining us today and being so open and honest about everything. So we have the next Housing Hive will be post CIH. So we'll have a stand now, taking our new shiny rocket caravan to meet with whoever wants to meet with us in there. And the follow-up Housing Hive will be some of the things that we've learned and some of the things we've taken from some of the keynote speakers and things like that. So we'll announce the dates for that and agenda and what we'll cover shortly. We did have, like I say, a load of other questions which PA have actually already kindly answered for us on the prep sheet that we were doing the other day. So we'll get that included in the follow-up email from Meg, who's on the call with us today as well. But appreciate everyone's time joining us today. And again, Dan and Nick, thanks for your time and thanks for being so great on this one. We'll speak to you all again soon, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one, and even maybe at CIH in person.
Fingers crossed. Thanks so much, everyone. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.